Wagging-Tales.
Has joined.
Hello, it's Sibling. Hey,
Hello,
Jennifer.
Roberts. Hey.
Hey, good to hear your voice, not under these circumstances, but yeah,
Right.
it's good to hear it from you.
Yeah, this is good. Thank you so much for doing this. And I know you said it was taking him some time to regenerate. Do you think he's at a regenerative point now, that this is a good time?
Yeah, he seems very good. His energy is really good, really positive, and he's really active. So that's the thing we'll talk a little bit more about. But yeah, he's regenerated really well, and you look at him as if he's the old Paddy, and he was doing well and feeling well, and
exactly.
It was really interesting because obviously I've had the honor of knowing you and the kiddies and working with Paddy all these years, and I went back through a lot of my old notes and emails and things dating way back when, and it sort of even refreshed my memory about how this all started and his journey with you, which was quite amazing.
Yeah, it really was. I've been comforted thinking of him that way, just remembering how it was when I first met him and how he was really active and prancing around that garage and sitting on the ledge, and he would sit under the cherry trees and watch people go to and fro to work as if he was supervising them. And as I contemplated getting him out of there, I think the one thing that made it certain for me was there was a leaf blowing through the garage, and he started playing with it, So that's how I'm holding him, in his forever self.
Yeah, I think that's a great honor because he remembers all that. And the thing I thought was really fascinating was, I remember you contacted me about that. Get this cat in the parking garage. What in the world do we do with the cat? People feeding him. How do I feed him? On the weekends and all that stuff, and all that. And I was thinking, that even though that part of his life was much different, he had to take care of himself and find himself and all that. It never seemed to faze him. He just, whatever he went through, and through his whole life, he just, kept moving. He kept doing and moving forward with it. He'd let you know if you were doing it wrong, or if he didn't want something, he'd let you know for sure. But even through all the challenges, especially in these latter years, it didn't get him down. He just kept pushing through, and he'd have these ups and downs of good days and not so good days, and I think it's a good way to remember him. He's very, very resilient, but definitely could be very demanding, very structured. I love the fact that as you said, he was supervising. He was a very good supervisor, and I think he still does that.
I think that was one thing that I felt that perhaps he missed in coming into a home was he didn't have those hundreds of people to supervise every day.
But I think he did a good job of trying to keep his kitty family in line. But we know they all have their own unique personalities. But he kept you on point, kept you focused, and that's and I think that will continue. I think it's a good way to look at it, and he's back to that old self again. He doesn't have to worry about all this the challenges and not knowing what part of his body was going to cause him problems on a particular day, and he doesn't have to worry about any of that anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Well, which brings me to the hardest question, which is what went wrong? What set this off? I was never expecting, something so sudden. Does he know?
Yeah, I wasn't either. You can, I try to let my conscious mind shut off and allow my subconscious to open up. And I do that, when I do Reiki and when I do communication, these things, I try not to let any, preconceived thoughts or even, oh, I had a cat that did this, so it must be like that, because everything's so unique. We've talked about this over the years in the workshops and stuff, and you can't go into it, assuming or believing certain things. So that being said, I do know the body. I think there was so much going on with his body, and he was trying to work with it, and obviously you were. And each little flare up, each little thing that popped up was always something new for him to work through. And so I really think that body was. I didn't get the sense the day before or anything that he was going to make his transition, but I think he knew at the end of the day that it just wasn't going to serve him anymore, and so he needed to move away and detach from that body. I think it's fascinating that and I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but I always think it's fascinating because we know when we reflect back on humans, oftentimes our human friends and family that make their transition, they'll have sort of a bounce back or rebound. They'll have a day or two or three that they're almost like everything's fine. There's not any issues anymore. And as I was looking back, and that's true with the animals as well, they know themselves very well, and so they have kind of a bounce back. And I looked at my notes, as I mentioned, and the day or so before, I was saying he was feeling his oats. He was feeling better. Was pushing the boundaries. He was doing the thing, see what he could get away with, what he couldn't get away with, and stuff. And I really think that was part of it. I think that he was having that real nice last hurrah with his body and feeling himself again. And so I think that's actually a real good honor because, for him to allow himself to be able to do that and feel like his old self again. So I think that was a big part of it. And truthfully, I think that I sort of, a story that I will relate is one of my own. And I had a schnauzer named Woody, and Woody obviously had him and his brother Buzz, but Woody for sure had all kinds of challenges throughout his whole life. He was my muse without me knowing it, because he was there at the start of all this, and he taught me so many lessons that I didn't realize he was teaching at the time, and a lot of these were lessons that I wish he wouldn't have taught me, but I've been able to share with thousands of other people, because I knew nothing about, he had sudden retinal degeneration, so he could see one day, wakes up the next morning, he's totally blind. I had no idea what that was. Yeah, and he went through diabetes. I never had an animal that had to have insulin shots twice a day. He had Cushing's disease. So all these things that I was learning that I could share, and different treatments and different food regimens. I mean, back in those days, veterinarians are not very good at nutrition as it is, but back in those days it was even worse. They didn't have a clue. It was basically, if you're sick, you take this prescription diet. And that was their only answers. So it forced me to sort of learn different options and different. When he made his transition, his liver values were off the charts and his kidneys were failing him. So we stayed with him and laid with him at home on the floor, and I slept with him on the floor in the bathroom Sunday night. And I told him, I said, buddy, I know you're done with that whole ordeal with the vet, but, if I'm going to have to do something. So if you want to make your transition, I'll be here. And if not, by morning we're going to have to go back and at least get some fluids in our system. Because I was already giving him sub-Q fluids, but it wasn't, as deep as they do at the vet's office. And sure enough, as soon as sunrise came, he woke up and made his transition right there in my arms on the floor. Yeah, and it
Oh.
was his. Yeah, and it was his, because I still went through all those doubts and questions, and should I have done it sooner? Should I have insisted him staying in the vet's office for the weekend? All these things that you go through, and at the end of the day, you learn that you did everything you could. I think Paddy, he had a really good bounce back, had a great day or so, feeling himself again. And then that body was just not going to serve him, so he needed to go, and he didn't want to have to. You did the right thing, don't get me wrong. Taking him to the vet, see if we could do something to get him stabilized, at least enough for you to get him back home, and then make a transition. You did the right thing there. I think he was just done with the vet. He just was done, and so he left.
Yeah, at that moment when I saw him breathing, I knew it was serious, and I harkened back to when Elvis had his stroke, and I didn't get Elvis to the vet, and so I had sort of mentally prepared myself that if that ever happened with any of the kitties or with Paddy, I would do my utmost to get them to the vet immediately. But he transitioned in the car, and that's part of what I regret.
Yeah, I know. It's so tough. It's so tough for him. He didn't feel any of that.
Okay.
Animals have we envision this golden cord, and the golden cord attaches the energy, spirit, soul, essence, however we want to label it. And it holds true for humans and animals alike. We all come from source, come from that universal space of love. We choose a body to fulfill a purpose, and we try to fulfill that purpose as long as we fulfilled it, and then we make our transition, or that body no longer serves us, and then we make our transition. The big difference is with humans, we often think of ourselves as our body. This is me. This meat suit that I'm wearing, this is me. And so we hold on too hard and too tight. We don't release when that body's the cord's starting to get severed and that body is going through its motions. We're reluctant to do that. We're afraid to do that about what's going on. All these things that we go through. And with animals, they have this really unique ability to know their body so well that when it's not serving them or they are in distress, they can pull away from that golden, keep the golden cord attached, but pull away from their body, let the body continue to do what it's going to do, and then make a decision on whether they want to re-enter that body or whether they want to sever that cord and make that transition. And, it's almost like I guess the best way to explain it is sort of like a comatose state, where you're still attached, the energy's still attached, but the body's still doing whatever it's doing. Animals do this a lot also when they're injured or they're really sick, and have disease. If they can get themselves healed well enough, then they go back into body. But if that body's not going to serve them, then they know, okay, it's time to let go, let that body, do its thing, but sever that golden cord. And that's where he went through. It's not easy on us humans because, once again, we're attached to the physical body, whether it's ours or whether it's a loved one, or whether it's a loved furry one. We still see that body, and when we want to do everything we can for them at that time in that body, and so when it goes through these vibrations and noises and releasing of fluids, these type of things, we automatically get drawn to the fact that we've got to do something for that instead of honoring and just letting the process happen and letting them make their transition. So it's really a learning lesson, and that's sort of where he was at that point. That body was giving out on him, and so he needed to step outside of it and then make that release. And he really didn't want to, like I said, you did the right thing, but he didn't really want to mess with that vet anymore. He was done with that. So that's okay because you did a real good job talking to him and letting him know what's going on. And though this part of it was very sudden, you always kept him abreast of everything, so he knew what was happening.
Yeah, I did. So my last little motion with him was the night before. He was lying on the big old dog bed that's in the kitchen, still there. And I did a little brushing, and he kind of fussed, and I said, okay, he doesn't like something, he tells me. But I gave him a little brushing, and, I did my usual routine. And then in the morning, I got a very early start because of the trash schedule. But when I came back in and started serving up breakfast, he wasn't there, which was very unusual. And so that's when I found him on the landing, halfway upstairs. He had vomited, he was panting, and so I carried him downstairs and got in touch with the emergency room and left as quickly as possible. So he was still, I think, in his body at the time we left, and it wasn't even an hour. It wasn't even an hour to get to this emergency room. So I, thank you for helping me understand that. And just in terms of the where he's at right now, is there anyone that he knows? Did Elvis meet him? Is he with Elvis?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things that goes on. He's made the transition. He's severed from that golden cord, and he made his journey to universal space of love, as I call it, our rainbow bridge, heaven. It's all the same place. That journey for him, it was, when he regenerated fairly quickly. This is Tuesday. That was Thursday. So, he regenerated at a pretty good pace. But this regeneration process and this journey to the universal space of love is just a little journey. That's the best way to explain it. It has no bearing on how they made their transition or what they did or, goodness, I got to regenerate quickly so I can get back or any of that. He hasn't made any of those decisions as far as a physical body is concerned. I always tell people, I always look at it as like, I don't know about you, but when you were growing up, did you take car trips for vacations and stuff with your parents?
Mhm.
Okay. So I always look at it in that aspect that that's what we did every single year. Every single year we did this, and I always tell people it's a lot like the journey when we make the journey, and also when our animals make the journey. Some of it is it's like taking a trip with your dad, and some dads I've heard like to get the family in a car and they'll take a different route. Maybe they'll see a fruit stand and they'll stop and check that out and buy some stuff, or they see a road sign thing and think, "Wow, this is a cool place. I want to check that out too." And then there's some like my dad that it's a 4.5-hour drive. If he can make it in 4, he's going to get there. No dilly dallying around. Go. And that's sort of, it's just a choice of what they do. So I think with Paddy, he checked it out, worked his way up there, and he's now part of that Rainbow Bridge, the universal space of love. And what he's surrounded by, when we talk about Elvis and, your dad comes to mind, for instance. Yeah. All the people and animals and family members that he knew that he had a heart connection with, but also those that you had a heart connection with. Mm-hmm. And it's pure love, and it doesn't look like anything in particular. It doesn't show the face of any particular person or any particular animal. It's just super familiar. It kind of gives me the notion of like meeting someone, and maybe you met them for the very first time, and you just hit it off like you've known each other for centuries. It's that comfortable, it's that loving, it's that kind of connection. And so that's what he's surrounded by. So everybody that's been part of his heart connection and yours, since you guys have the heart connection, that's where he's at. And it's very familiar, very comforting, very loving. His vision of the animals and the people that are around is probably going to be different than our vision of it. Or even your and I, if we had a common, say we had a common grandmother, your view of grandma would be, in your mind's eye, would be different than mine, or slightly different. I sort of laughingly say it's a lot like if you. I'm really dating myself here, but you remember back in, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but the U.S. Postal Service was going to put out a stamp, and it was going to be an Elvis stamp, as we're talking about Elvis here. And you had the choice to vote, and you could choose the young Elvis, the young, skitty, vibrating the hips Elvis, or the latter Elvis. And, with the rhinestones and the mullet and all the stuff or not the mullet, but the sideburns and everything he had. And they had, in the day, had a big voting thing. And at the end of the day, they ended up putting both of them out. So I think it was story short, but I'll consolidate best I can. But she was always terrified of storms, and rightfully so, since she was dumped in the storm and the rain. And she was very timid. You had to announce yourself and talk to her for a couple of minutes before you even picked her up. Otherwise, she let out this huge scream like you were killing her. But she would always urinate. She would always pee. Whenever there's rain or storm, she would always pee. Whenever she got worried or you picked her up without announcing, she'd pee. Now, Nisi, our first dog, she never did any of that. Never did any of that. Well, baby made her transition. She developed cancer, and she made her transition. And within a week, after having Nisi for 10 years, never being afraid of storms, never peeing on the floor, never had an incident, all of a sudden, out of the blue, a storm comes, Nisi starts peeing on the floor. And so for the next 5 years of her life, whenever there was a storm, she would urinate on the floor. So, so I didn't know this back in the day, but as I learned, as I communicate with the animals and I communicated with them, I realized that was part of the imprint. That was part of the teaching that she left behind. So out of all the things that she could have left behind, she left others, but for the most part, that's the one that stuck out and Nisi picked up on. So you're going to see that quite a bit. And so, those are the two things you're going to see quite a bit is Paddy coming around to check in on you, make appearances, and the other is to leave his imprint with the others. Now, I know you've seen the ornament move on the little tree. I believe that there was an ornament move. Have you seen some other things, or have you heard some other things, or felt some other things?
The rescue lady who had helped me bring Paddy in gave me these two stuffed cats, and this one is gray and white, so it's really life-size. And it was at the top of the tree, and, on Thursday, after just a day of, stress and crying and complete overwhelmed by grief, I was sitting on the bed, which is Sugar's room, and it just really seemed like this little stuffed animal was moving around and doing talking, and just like was moving. This Shayla yesterday, lying in the sun in the same spot Paddy always liked. In fact, the kitties kind of fight over it because the sun comes in at a certain time of day through the upper area, and she was almost belly up, like Paddy used to do. And in fact, but Bala was just down here with me while we were talking, and went tummy up the way Paddy would do. And in terms of sounds, I did have that dream last night that I told you about, and as I woke up, I felt that I believed I heard his little croaky meow, his little scoldy meow. So I can say that has been, that has been present for me. I have a little clipping of his fur, so I'm keeping that right in front of myself as I work. And I'm thinking about, what kind of a little memorial I'll put together for him. I think I may very well do an episode about him, because I think it's an important story about how a cat comes from outdoors and makes it into a life.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. People don't realize
Yeah.
that can happen.
Yeah.
That a lot of people
And
think they're.
oh, just even the rescue people who were expert about it would told me that no, this cat must go outside. Then he met Elvis, and then he started being very aggressive with me. He would sit on the stairs; they were slatted, and spit at me. Became food possessive, and if I'd go into the kitchen to feed Elvis and come out, he would like block me, and it was just as funny as could be. But there was a day when I turned around in the kitchen, and the door looks down, and he came up my leg with those beautiful big paws and looked me in the eye, and I took that picture, and that was to me the look of love. My friends who rescue cats say the same thing. That was the look of love when he loved me, and I could see that he loved me and we would be bonded together. So I have that picture on that wall, and I also have the picture that's sketched, the same woman, Susie, who sketched did your sketch for you.
Yeah.
And Jake, of Elvis and Paddy looking out the door, and it's a very beautiful picture because they're looking out at the light. And as I realized Paddy was declining, and was just having one physical challenge after another of complication, I would sometimes look at that picture and say, this is how it's going to be. He's going to go into the light. And I've held that kind of as a thing.
We'll keep up the Reiki with the others as needed, and
Yeah.
But know all is well. If we need to circle back with Paddy or you need anything from me, you just let me know.
Sheila. Oh, yes, you want her to visit, don't you? Yes, you do. You want her to visit. Okay. Yes, I love you too. Good boy. Yeah. He looks just like everyone else, doesn't he? Hmm? There he is. Just like Elvis. Yeah. Here he is. Yeah. Yeah. That's our little Elvis right there. Yeah.